here's a guy who barely graduated high school. The only real education I got was in the plumbing industry. How am I going to do this on my own? My brother that lived in California, he's actually one of my big mentors as well. And I called him and I'm like, what do I do? And he said, go to work on yourself.
Hello and welcome to Business Underdog, the podcast where we bring you inspiring stories for the aspiring entrepreneur. I'm your host, Eric Remer, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this exciting journey. Well, welcome to Business Underdog. This is your host, Eric Remer, and today it's just an amazing episode. Able to talk to somebody who is a true inspiration. Not only a business underdog, I kind of tell him he's a business underdog times two because he not only built the business, but he successfully sold his plumbing business and then is now giving back from a coaching, mentoring, speaking standpoint, helping the next generation of, business owners, could be plumbing, HVAC, but really across the board, just be more successful. His story is amazing. Truly reinvention, resilience, paying it forward, and at a core level, turning a very difficult background, real true adversity, into a purpose-driven business that has changed the lives of many people. He wrote an amazing book called Never Buy the Book, which you should go out and pick up, that has amazing lessons, real life lessons, not just to grow your business more successfully, which it's a big part of it, but also to grow yourself. So his combination of, as I always talk about, how do you grow yourself personally and professionally is what Kelly's all about. So sit back, enjoy, and I think you'll learn a lot in this conversation. Welcome to Business Underdog. I'm your host, Eric Remer. And again, I could not be more excited to have my guest today. This guest not only is a true business underdog, but he's kind of the next level business underdog. Took his business, successfully built it up, all the great things that he learned along the way, sold it, and now has taken his knowledge, his learnings, his experience, and giving back to, next generation of, businesses so they can have the same success he did. So it's kind of business underdog times two. So Kelly Schols, who I'll be introducing shortly, is an author, speaker, business and financial coach, and success mentor. The things we're going to go over today, which are awesome for any business, regardless of what your business is, reinvention, resilience, and once you have that success, how do you pay it forward? And one of the coolest things about Kelly's story, which we'll go into, is, which all of us have to deal with at some level, and he did it more than most of us, turning adversity into truly a purpose-driven business. So with that, Kelly, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I appreciate it.
Well, some people may know that you have one of the most fascinating stories that I've come across. If you got business underdog, I'm talking in business and life in general. And much of that is chronicled in the book that you wrote called Never Buy the Book, which I recommend anybody to pick up because it's not, we were talking about earlier, not only an easy read, but incredibly informative from just a real life perspective. It's no BS, a matter of fact, very raw, very real. So I don't want to spend the next, half hour summarizing the book, but I would love to kick it off and really begin the path from, your hardship to your business ownership, really understanding what inspired you to begin your entrepreneurial journey, based upon some of the things that you had to overcome, prior to even getting into business.
Well, believe it or not, I really didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I grew up on a dairy farm, 60 miles north of Seattle in a little farming and logging community. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was dating a girl and her dad owned a plumbing company and asked if I wanted to come to work for him. So at 16 years old, I'm like, sure. I didn't like working on the dairy farm. So went to work for him and worked all through high school, was not a very good student. So, I learned at a very, very young age that the only thing that was going to get me where I wanted to be was working hard. So I had a work ethic that most people at that age didn't have.
When you think about the work ethic, which is kind of part of your early experience that shaped kind of your business philosophy, what else would you say in kind of your earlier life, trials and
Hmm.
tribulations helped to kind of, shape your business philosophy as you started to grow into your business?
Well, one thing, I'm the youngest of three boys, and if you read my book, uh, you'll find out that I went through a lot of different things. I was not your mild-mannered child. Yeah, went through alcoholism, a lot of different things, ended up in jail, um, just multiple different things. But one thing was, being the youngest of three boys, my mom raised us with an iron fist. And one thing she always told us is she never wanted to hear us say we couldn't do something.
Interesting.
Can't was not allowed to be used in our household.
That's great.
So from that point and being the youngest of three and being actually the mildest of the three, I was always pushed to better to do
You were the mildest time. I read your book, and reading your story, it'd be interesting to hear your brother's
right.
stories too, right?
Yeah. So, really it was the resilience of can't never did anything. And that was something that my mom from the time we were little kids pushed on us. And I ended up doing that with my two girls too, is I don't ever want to hear can't.
Yeah.
There's always a will, there's a way, figure it out.
And
So,
that's great. That's great advice. And that probably, kind of transitions into kind of the setbacks that you had to overcome once you started this business with that mindset of can't's not an option. What were some of those really difficult challenges that you faced both professionally and personally as you were
mhm,
building up your first business, which was a really
yeah.
successful plumbing business?
Well, personally, the first one was, realizing and coming to the fact of at 24 years old, I was an alcoholic. At 24 years old, so when I was in the plumbing business in high school, got out of high school and went directly into the plumbing. A few years later, I ended up moving to Southern California, born and raised, in a little bedroom community in Washington State. And my brother, who's in the car business and still is to this day, was living down in Southern California, and he asked me to move down there. Well, the company I was working for wasn't doing very well, and one of the guys who ended up becoming my mentor left the company and went and started another one. So, 21 years old, it's like, hey, why not move to Southern California? Sunshine,
Right.
women. So moved down there, was living down there. Well, Steve, who left the other company, he started calling me about a month after I got down there and was trying to get me to move back up here. And I was like, I'm not moving back up there. Heck, I'm in Southern California, sunshine. So took about 3 years of him calling me every month. And then finally, I decided I wasn't going anywhere and moved back up to Washington. When I moved back up here, I was completely broke. I owed $500 on a car that was worth about 300. I had $300 cash in my pocket and the clothes in my car, and that was it. And I moved back and ended up getting a DUI, which was my second one when I moved back. And I realized at that point that I wasn't going to be successful. I wasn't going to be, who I wanted to be. From the time I was a little kid, and I don't know why, but from the time I was a little kid, I always wanted to be a millionaire. Didn't know what it looked like, didn't know why. But I knew that's where I wanted to go. So when I got that second DUI, I had to do a lot of soul searching. I had to really sit back and look at myself and say, hey, what are you doing with your life? So really that was the big, I want to call it aha moment in my life.
Yep.
And I had to look in the mirror, take responsibility, and fix myself. So
It's really amazing.
at 24,
And that shaped that changed the trajectory of your
oh
life.
yeah,
Do you think that also changed the way you became a leader as well and the way you led other people?
It did, because at that point I wasn't a leader.
Right.
You know, I had a lot of conversations with Steve, my mentor, who brought me back, and ended up, buying him out and stuff. And we had a lot of conversations. Um, but and that's where mentors really come into effect, is he believed in me before I believed in myself.
Yeah.
And he did, because of my work ethic.
Yeah. It's funny. You stole the words out of my mouth. That was my next thing. What did it feel like to be believed in when it seems like at that moment of time, you didn't believe in
Yeah.
yourself? And that we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into kind of the mentorship stuff. But, I assume as he was kind of continually calling you, telling you to come, telling you the opportunity,
Yeah.
there must have been a part of you thinking, what is this guy
Right.
doing? Why does he,
Yep.
keep wanting me, essentially? But to your point, you said in your book several times, until you believe in yourself,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? You have to make those decisions. Everyone else,
Yep.
mom, dad, Steve, everyone else can tell you you're great,
Yeah.
but until you believe that you're worthy of
Yep.
the success and the happiness that you decide you want to have in life, it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. So that's really awesome. And I assume partly because of, your life changes, your decision to not only, move on from alcohol, but also to make yourself a better just human being on a daily basis, as well as kind of the mentorship and the gifts that Steve provided. Do you think that helped cultivate the culture that you try to create as you took over the company based on, generosity and support within your company?
100%. 100%. When I ended up buying Steve out, it was right after September 11th. So,
Wow.
The country's in a recession. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. I buy him out. Here's a guy who barely graduated high school. The only real education I got was in the plumbing industry. And
Yeah.
I'm buying him out, and I'm like, I don't, how am I going to do this on my own? Well, my brother that lived in California, he's actually one of my big mentors as well. And I called him and I'm like, what do I do? And he said, go to work on yourself.
Interesting.
So I'm like, okay, well, how do I do that?
Exactly. That's a good
Right.
question.
So he directed me to Brian Tracy. And I bought Brian Tracy's Universal Laws of Success and Achievement. It was a cassette series, if people remember what cassettes are. And I bought that, and I listened to that in my truck every day for 2 years. Every day I would be driving in my truck, I'd have that on. And as a matter of fact, by that point, I was married. My kids were young. So I have 2 daughters. They're now 30 and 28. But at the time, they were like, 5, 6 years old. Every time they'd get in the truck, I'd have it playing. Well,
I love it.
anybody that's listened to Brian Tracy knows that Brian Tracy has one of the best messages there is, but he's very monotone when he speaks. My daughters would get in the truck and they're, Dad, we don't want to listen to that. Well, I'd make them listen to it for a minute or two, and then I'd, turn music on or whatever. But that fast forward, 20 some years later, and both my daughters are entrepreneurs. Both of them are very successful.
I love it. So little by little, you seed it into that, into their consciousness, the power of, success, growth, personal growth, professional growth, all of that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's funny. I did similar things. I think there's an age where the kids overrule that. Like I had some of my own kind of, during my own growth, and I had similar type of situation. I think my daughter was probably like 8 or 9 when she's like, Dad, turn this shit off, like,
right.
But it got into them. They heard it,
Yeah.
it was, I had read a couple of different things. I'd heard Brian and, when this was kind of early on, but when The Secret came out talking about manifestations and things of that nature. And, I had done some stuff prior, but I was, I actually liked some of her messaging and I liked the Wayne Dyers of the world and some of those people, and I would play their tapes in my car, and I'd have Wayne on talking about the power of intention, and he was, I'd be like, I'd stop and I'm like, Ellen, did you hear that? And she's like, Dad, I'm trying not to listen.
Right.
That's really
Yeah.
great, though. That's really awesome. I love that. So, within your, business, you had brought this up earlier when we talked, what role did community involvement and really you were focused on helping your team have financial literacy? Not only does it help them, how do you think that helped your company grow?
Oh, tremendously. I mean, we used it as a recruiting tool to bring techs in, is personal development. So with personal development, so we ended up going through some of the stuff we went through. We ended up joining Service Nation Alliance, and became really involved in that. And through that, learning from other people, I learned that about the training and coaching and different things. So we were actually training 5 days a week at our company.
Wow.
And everything from personal development. One day was dedicated to personal development, sales training, customer service training, technical training. So we were doing that. And my manager and I were looking for content one day, and he said, hey, why don't we do some Dave Ramsey training? And at that point, I'm like, who's Dave Ramsey? I'd never heard of him. He goes, so he tells me, so I look him up and I go, oh my God, I've lived my life by this guy's principles.
Interesting.
Well, that's something Steve had taught me. The mentorship that he taught me was, pay off your bills, do this. And he, first thing he did when I moved back from California is he handed me a book, The Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah.
And he said, here, kid, read this. And I read it, and then he mentored me through it. So when I started reading and figuring out about Dave Ramsey stuff, I'm like, yeah, I've lived my life by this guy's principles. So we started teaching our employees that. So at the time, we took 14 employees and put them through an 8-week course. And when we started it, their total debt with all of them was like $196,000, not including their homes. In 8 weeks, that debt was down to $146,000.
Wow.
And
did you see how many of those people that you had trained along the way went on to ultimately build their own businesses? Was that part of your goal to help them ultimately achieve what you achieved?
There are the majority of the companies in my community, the plumbing companies in my community, have worked for me or Steve at one time or another. And I still see quite a few of them. I just did a remodel on my house, and I had one of my ex-employees come in and do the plumbing for me. But yeah, I see them around the community. I talk to them. They know that they can call me at any time when they have questions or anything.
And it's funny. Some people would look at that and be like, well, you're helping to create competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, no, I'm helping to create better human beings,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If they're competitors, they're competitors. There's enough business for everybody, but these people will not just be better employees while they're with me. They're going to be better, partners, husbands, fathers, brothers, sisters, whatever they're going to be. And if we as, leaders, whatever platform we have, can enable people to grow as the words I use, grow as people and professionals, people first, professional second. How do you grow as a human being first and foremost? Because that's all we are here. Then we win. Success of our business becomes a secondary causation of what we did in the front part, which it sounds like that was your philosophy from really day one. And that's so cool. I love it as well. When someone call me and be like, they're starting a business or they're doing something. And Eric, I just want to thank you. When I learned some of the stuff at, Pay Simple back in the day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it just, you get a little like,
Yeah,
it feels
it
good.
does feel good,
you
doesn't
weren't
it?
trying. You were just doing what you felt was right. But if they took that, whatever that they took from you, hopefully they ignored some of the noise that I said
Right.
and took the good stuff, and they went on and did something. It feels awesome. And I'm sure you've had that many times over.
I have. And, I learned, and I think Brian Tracy's the one that said it, and either Brian Tracy or Zig Ziglar, the more people you help, the more you'll get what you want.
Right.
And
Totally.
that's
Um,
totally true.
it's totally
Yeah.
true. Because you're it's on so many levels. So part of your process, what you did within the training, you know, you have a strong belief in mentorship. How do you apply that mentorship and call it your coaching practice today? How does that kind of come together?
Well, number one is showing them. And, one big thing that a lot of business owners are afraid of, and men in general, is being vulnerable. That's tough for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
as you can tell from my book, I'm a very vulnerable person.
Incredible. Yeah.
Um, Same thing when I speak. Same thing when I'm coaching. I'm very vulnerable. I'm not afraid to share my story, what I went through, what I dealt with, how I got to where I'm at, because people help me get through it. My ex-partner who mentored me, my brother who mentored me. I have some other people that I've met through Service Nation Alliance and different things that have been mentors and coaches for me. Counseling, I did a lot of counseling through different parts of my life. So any time I've had diversity or challenges, the first thing you do is look at yourself. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, what can I do? What can I change as a person to move forward? And when you do that, it's like, okay, well, I can change myself. I can do this. Now, how can I help other people? And just by sharing your story and being vulnerable, it lets people know that you're real,
Yeah.
that you're not just some suit up there, collecting all the money, because that's what a lot of people see.
Yeah. Totally. It's interesting when you use the word as you're authentic and people can feel that. I mean, especially the younger kids can read through the bullshit real
Oh,
quick, right? And
yeah,
they know when someone's being real. What I find so interesting as you're willing to open up and being vulnerable, most people at a core level, they want that. They just don't have the permission to be real. And as you show up real and you show up raw and you show up with all your warts and all your nonsense that we all deal with in life, it lets the guard down for those people that you interact with, whoever they are. That could be employees, partners, investors, bankers, all walks of life are like, oh boy, this guy Kelly, I could be real with him. I've been wanting to be real, but nobody allows me to
right.
be because I'm supposed to be this strong man and
Yeah,
can't show my weakness. And then all of a sudden it's this relief
yeah,
that you give people the gift
yeah.
of opening themselves up in a world that doesn't usually allow them to do that. So
Well, and that's the thing.
that's amazing.
That's the thing with financial training is it's so tough for people to talk about finances. When I first started it with my company, people were hesitant. But as I shared that, hey, at 24 years old, I was dead broke and an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Now I'm debt free and a multimillionaire. And here's how I did it through the home service business.
Yeah.
And I wasn't making tons of money, but here's the principles that I applied to my life to get me to where I am. And when you take somebody who barely graduates high school, who been in and out of jail when I was younger, almost got killed 3 different times when I was younger in motorcycle accident, car accidents, and completely broke. And to be able to overcome that and move forward, now I can share that with people and be open, and they're like, hey, yeah, he is a real person.
Yeah. That's amazing. And it probably resonates with a lot of people who've had similar struggles. One of the things when you talk about money, which I think is amazing because I think it's insane. I have 3 kids. They all went through high school. There's not one financial literacy course in their high schools or their colleges, right? And I try to give them that, but it's hard because, I'm living my life and stuff, but they learn calculus, which they'll never use, but they don't learn how to, add, pay a checking account, whatever it is, so it's kind of an insane thing. But one of the things I really loved in your book when I read about it was kind of the money mindset. of how, the get rich, quick schemes, everyone's sitting there who might have been in your situation, who's broke, as doesn't know where they're going to go in the future. And all they're thinking is, how do I go from here to being a millionaire? Because that's what you want it to be, right? And, it's funny. I don't know exactly your age, but like I'm in my early 50s. And, at this stage of life, a lot of my, friends I went to high school with, the ones that kind of had the mindset of, little by
Yep.
little, and they just kept building themselves as human beings, building their professions little by little, they're mostly in decent positions in
Yeah.
life. They're, at varying degrees and varying levels,
Yep.
but they did it. The friends I have that were always swinging for that
Swinging for
get
the
rich
fence.
scheme,
Yeah.
they're still
Yeah.
swinging. And honestly, in your mid 50s, it gets harder to hit that ball,
Yeah.
right? So it's, years went by where they could have been incrementally building themselves up. Nothing goes up into the right forever. It just doesn't work like that, right? You may have a little bit of bump, but if you don't have the foundation underneath what you're trying to create, it will crumble at some point. And I love the way you kind of go about talking about that money mindset. Because people ever read the book, without going through the whole chapter or section, well, what would be one of the things that you'd kind of, call out that is really important to somebody who's trying to build themselves up from they may even have a business, they want to build it up, but what kind of money mindset should they have when they start that business?
Well, a couple different things is you got to remember the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
I love that.
Okay, so if you want to have a successful business, you should be successful at home first. And that's when I'm doing my coaching, that's one thing that I discovered very, very quickly is if somebody's financials, if they don't have accurate, correct financials by the 10th of the month, guess what? What do you think their home financial situation is going to be like? It's going to be in shambles. So get your home finances in order. And, little hinges swing big doors. It's the same thing with money. Little things add up to a lot. So pay attention to the little things. And I say all the time, pay attention to your needs now, and you can have what you want later.
Yeah. That's a great way to think through. I love that little hinges swing big doors. That's a really cool little metaphor there. So I kind of skipped over because we started talking about it, but you sold your business successfully, which is awesome. You kind of took it over, you bought your partner out, you went through the trials and tribulations, and you got to the point where you had a really awesome exit. What inspired you to shift from that business ownership, building that business, into both coaching and speaking, what you're doing now?
Well, it goes back to the financial literacy training I was doing. So I did that training in 2014 or 13. And that year through Service Nation Alliance, I was a big part of that. They started hearing about what I was doing with the training. And before I knew it, I was speaking at events, talking about the training I was doing with my employees. And through that, I started traveling more, going to conferences, speaking about financial literacy training with the employees. And my partners, I had two partners, minority partners at the time, they came up to me and said, "We want to buy you out." And I was like, okay. So we put a deal together, and I started going out, and I met a really good friend. He was a mentor, coach, and has become a very, very close friend of mine, Kenny Chapman, through Service Nation Alliance. And he has a coaching group, and he asked me to come work with him. So after I sold out, I went and worked with him for a year and then went out on my own.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And now that you're, you kind of left what you've known for so many years and you're into kind of the, coaching and speaking, how do you define success now? What does that look like in your current role that you're helping others, not building your business, but you're helping others build their businesses and really build debt-free futures? What does that look like for you? How do you define yourself success going forward?
When I see people living by their why, because that was so important to me, is my why. Everything I did was for my family. And then it became to the point of for my family, and then it became for my employees. So as I can see my family grow, as I can see my employees grow, that's just satisfying. So now when I can see that, and I can see, and I've actually worked myself out of jobs by helping companies grow, and then they turn around and sell. So um, I've had 3 different clients do that.
That's awesome. Well, that's success by any
Yeah,
definition, right? That's amazing.
but
That's really amazing.
yeah, when I can see that they've got to a point where they don't have to worry about money anymore, it's really satisfying to see that.
No, I have a little saying where you can't thrive when you're trying to
Right.
survive, right? And as if you're living in survival and you're worried about, your next paycheck, your next payroll, you don't have the mental capacity and the energy to really focus on how do I not just survive, which we all have to do at some point in our lives, but how do I thrive? And it sounds like you really help them build that platform in their
Yeah.
businesses so they can get over the survival mode and begin to start thinking of how they actually thrive.
Well, and that was a big turning point for me in my business is when I got to the point of being completely debt-free personally,
Yeah.
it completely shifted my mindset in my business. But once I bought Steve out, I took over the business and I became financially free personally. It completely shifted my mindset of business. I didn't have to worry so much. I knew my wife and kids were taken care of. So
And you can make from that place, you can make good
yeah,
decisions from your decision making process is so much clearer when you're making it for reasons that are what's right for the business, not how am I going to survive next week, next month, next year. That's amazing. I usually at this stage kind of go into, which I do want to ask you because you have so many, top lessons, which I'll ask you in a second. But if people haven't read the book, never buy the book. At the end of it, he's got this 10 renegade laws of success, and so he kind of lists them all out. And rather than give everybody those because they should get the book and read it, but what would the top lessons would you say from your journey that others should carry with them?
number one, work hard. Nothing ever makes up for hard work. I mean, like I said, I barely graduated high school. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I would say that all the time. But I had a work ethic that I could outwork anybody. But it wasn't, and it's working smarter sometimes. Just, looking to other people. Look for a mentor. Look for somebody that's been there and done that. You're not going to do it on your own. In my industry, in the plumbing HVAC world, it's a copycat business. Don't be afraid to use other people's ideas. The people and the ideas that I met through the different groups and best practices I was involved in helped me get to where I was at.
Yeah. With such good advice. People always, I'm an entrepreneur like you are, and I've started 5 different businesses, and people are like, well, I have this really great idea. I'm like, you don't really need a great idea. Just do something better than someone's doing it, right? Learn from them. And if you could execute at a really high level on something that has already been done, it's a heck of a lot easier than trying to recreate the wheel that doesn't exist already. So it sounds like that's part of your training lessons as well. When you say one of your renegades laws of success is be adaptable to change. What does that mean for you and your business, and how do you kind of bring that on to the clients you work with?
I mean, things are going to come up. You got to be willing to change and adapt to what comes up. For me, going through alcoholism, I had to learn to change. What am I going to change? And for me, it's looking in the mirror. Anytime adversity comes up, look in the mirror first. What can I change about myself? Because you're not going to change anything on the outer part, right? So what can I change in myself to be able to move forward? Because the only thing is that you can control are your own thoughts and emotions anyway. You can't control anything outside of that. So if I can change myself, become a better person, and learn to control my thoughts and emotions, it's going to help everything outside to move forward and be better.
No, that's great advice. The last lesson I want you to share, because I really, this is something that I think I struggled with, and a lot of people do, is your number 10 laws of success, which is, blow through naysayers. When we have mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, people around you telling you, you're not going to do that. That's crazy. You can't, you never went to high school. You can't run a business, or whatever that would be. What advice do you have to people to, it's hard to overcome people in your life who many don't want you to succeed. You had people who wanted to succeed. You didn't talk about the people who try to hold you back, and those people who wanted to keep you down where they are, which all of us have those people in our journeys as we're growing. So, how would you tell people to kind of overcome that, blow through naysayers law of success?
Again, know what your why is. Why are you doing it? Why are you getting up every morning going to work? Why are you, why'd you start the business? For me, it was my family. I came from a broken family when I was a child, went through a lot of stuff. My mom was married 3 times. My dad was married 3 times. I'm the only one in my family that's never been divorced. I lost my wife, but in that sense, I've gotten remarried, but I'm the only one that's never been divorced. I didn't want that. I have a very close relationship with both my daughters. So, just look at yourself, move forward, look at your why. What is your why? Why are you doing what you do? And
well, Kelly, that is, we can go and I could do a list of all the amazing pieces of advice you shared here, but I want to thank you for, again, being who you are, which you always do. It sounds like, showing up raw, real, vulnerable, and sharing your kind of experience and your life journey with me and our listeners today. So,
bet.
Kelly, thanks again. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate having me on. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for joining me on this episode. I'd like to invite you to subscribe to Business Underdog on your favorite podcast platform. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll be the first to hear these incredible stories. Please be sure to follow us on social and visit our website at businessunderdog.com for episode updates, resources, and more. And thank you for listening today. Until next time, stay inspired, keep pushing forward, and embrace your inner underdog.